Good day, everyone. We're here at the Postgraduate Institute of Management with Dr. Trevor Mendes. He is a senior consultant at PIM. He's also a strategist, management consultant, and an academic by profession. Welcome to our program today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. The theme of the conference, of the AMDISA conference that will be held here in Sri Lanka is management development through international networking and collaborations. And your area of expertise is corporate governance, international trade, and best practices. How do you see these two coming together?
Actually, corporate governance is an emerging arena, not only in Sri Lanka, but also across the world. And especially during the last 5 to 10 years, the exigency of corporate governance is quite evident across the world if you really analyze the corporate scandals that have taken place. So under such scenario, I think corporate governance is so important for each and every corporate company, as well as for the multinationals as well. And also international trade is also linked to some of these corporate governance activities. And also under globalization, world has become one global village. When we do business, we have to go definitely across the national borders, because we have to think about the entire world from the global perspective, not only from the Sri Lankan perspective. So as a result, I think international trade, international business, and corporate governance can be integrated, can be linked together as important areas.
All right. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of corporate governance, please?
Yes. If you really analyze the history of corporate governance, though corporate governance was introduced to the world in the recent past, about say 2 decades back, especially after the Enron case in America. But corporate governance was visible in other terms or under different terminology and different jargons across the world. As an example, if you really see the history of India, around 300 BC, there was a system called Panchayat system in India. Under this scheme, the ruler used to assign certain responsibilities for village leaders to manage those villages and then to send the harvest back to the ruler. So they were given certain tasks, certain responsibilities. So even at that time, corporate governance was there to a certain extent, but as I told you earlier, not under the same terminology or same jargon, but under different terminology and different systems.
Okay. All right. And so modern day corporate governance, how is that shaping?
Yes. Now, if I elaborate about this modern day corporate governance or corporate governance in the contemporary world, this has become so important due to so many reasons. One is that if you really analyze the way trade is being handled or trade is happening across the world, competition has become so stiff and fierce. Companies try to maximize their profits, maximize their wealth, forgetting all other aspects and also forgetting all other accepted norms across the world. So when they pay so much of attention to make so much of profits and to maximize their wealth, always there's a tendency to forget or ignore certain ethics and values that have been embedded to the system. So due to that, corporate governance plays a pivotal role in this aspect. When you try to maximize your profits, corporate governance will give them some kind of a reminder, okay, there are certain ethics and accountabilities to be followed. Please adhere to these ethics and accountabilities. That's one aspect. Because in time to come, the importance and the exigency of corporate governance would be felt much more or in a deeper way, because the competition will also going to grow so much. So when the competition becomes stiff and fierce, importance of corporate governance will also will be felt, equally, or will be people will feel, companies will feel the importance of corporate governance in time to come. That's one aspect. Second aspect, if you really see the companies, the way companies are managed and directed, sometimes there's a tendency for the directors to think as if they are the owners for companies. But actually the owners are the shareholders. And shareholders only appoint the directors to run those companies on behalf of the shareholders. So if you really see the scandals across the world, from Enron to so many other, World.com, and even if you take certain companies like Selinco in Sri Lanka, the way such companies were managed, we can say without any hesitation that they were not following proper corporate governance practices. So due to these reasons, I can say that modern day corporate governance is so important, and companies should adhere to the corporate governance practices, and also if they follow proper corporate governance practices, they can even improve their profits. Because some of the view that if they follow corporate governance, their profits will come down, but it's a myth, I must tell you. If they follow proper corporate governance systems, if they adhere to certain corporate governance practices, definitely there's a huge possibility and probability of improving their profits, probably even in exponential terms.
All right. And so what is the situation here in Sri Lanka in terms of corporate governance?
Yeah, in Sri Lanka, especially, I must tell you, the banking sector follows corporate governance to a great extent, because central bank is closely monitoring. And compared to other sectors in Sri Lanka, banking and finance sectors have been given proper instructions, proper guidance with certain clauses to follow under corporate governance. So banking sector is covered to a great extent, but not up to 100%, I must tell you. But at the same time, if you see the other sectors like manufacturing and service sector and so many other sectors, and even if you go through the sectors introduced by Colombo Stock Exchange and the Securities and Exchange Commission, I don't think that those sectors, though they have certain corporate governance practices, they adhere to those practices up to 100%. So some more room is available for them to adhere to such practices. That's one area. Second area is that I think if we want to introduce corporate governance, all these locally recognized bodies such as the Central Bank, Inland Revenue, Stock Exchange, Securities Exchange, Securities and Exchange Commission, all these locally recognized bodies should get together and should come up with a proper set of corporate governance practices across the country, not only for the banking sector, but also for the other sectors. And the third one is, in Sri Lanka, I personally feel, having done my PhD in corporate governance, I personally feel and I observe that most of the corporate governance practices have been introduced from the financial perspective, which is a shortcoming in Sri Lanka, because you can introduce so many other practices from the management perspective, legal perspective, regulators' perspective, and all these aspects can be done, or new systems can be introduced covering those areas as well. So we see some kind of tunnel vision in corporate governance in Sri Lanka, because most of the clauses and the rules and regulations and the practices that have been already introduced is mainly from the financial perspective. That's my view.
All right. And so is it that companies are expected to self-regulate themselves, or is it that an outside body regulates them in terms of corporate governance?
Yeah, it's like this. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, there are basically, or say, we can broadly categorize our companies into two categories or two classifications. One is the public quoted companies, where companies have gone and issued shares and they are listed at the Colombo Stock Exchange. Other category is the private limited liability companies, where they have not gone for a share issue. So public quoted companies have to strictly adhere to the given corporate governance practices because of the Colombo Stock Exchange regulations, Securities and Exchange Commission, probably Central Bank, and one or two other bodies. So they are compelled to adhere to. Sometimes they don't want to, but still they are compelled to. That's the reality. But if you take the private limited liability companies, they hardly adhere to the given corporate governance practices. So that's a huge shortcoming. Now recently I can quote one example, shining example for this. At a particular forum, one gentleman in the audience asked me, can't we have two sets of regulations for private limited liability companies and public quoted companies? So I said that can't be done because we can't have different rules depending on the nature of the company. And also I justified my statement saying that even if you are driving a, say, private coach or a three-wheeler in Sri Lanka, still you have to adhere to one set of road rules, right? Irrespective of the size of the company, size of the vehicle, or whatever the other reasons. So we have one set of road rules. So likewise, any country should have one set of corporate governance practices, whether it's a public quoted company or a private limited liability company. So private limited liability companies will also one day go for a share issue when they are expanding. And if they follow proper corporate governance systems at this stage, or as a private limited liability company, then they don't have to make radical changes when they become a public quoted company in terms of corporate governance.
All right. What is the international experience in terms of corporate governance, as in what are the best practices that could be introduced here?
Yeah, it's like this now. When you say corporate governance practices, this will depend on the country and the structure of the country. As an example, in certain countries, banking system is so powerful. As an example, if you take Japan, their Kiretsu system is so powerful under corporate governance where banks play a key role. And if you take a country like Germany, they have lots of Fortune 500 companies in that country. So those companies and the funding agents are also playing a key role for corporate. So this varies from country to country depending on their business volumes, international trade, the given legal system, and also the structure of the country, and also various other aspects like the funding agents, their regulations, and so on. So what we can do is we can cover some of those, or we can take some of those good practices from various countries and then introduce them, localizing that to suit our culture, our legal system, our volume of business, keeping the global context in mind.
And who would be the best actor to undertake that responsibility?
Yeah, now at the moment, Institute of Chartered Accountants is playing a key role with regard to corporate governance. But as I told you earlier, most of our practices are skewed towards financial aspects. So I think, as I told you earlier, so many organizations should get together and think about, or should introduce some kind of a good set of corporate governance practices for local companies from every angle and from every dimension, covering or encapsulating areas like management, even marketing, or now as an example, even in marketing, we have lots of unethical marketing. So there's no governance in that. Companies just go and advertise without. So these are some of the things, areas that we can cover. So that's just so to cover or to encapsulate all these areas, all these recognized bodies should get together and then come up with a proper corporate governance system or set of practices covering all these areas is a must for Sri Lanka.
All right. There's also international trade that we can cover in this interview. How would you suggest that international trade is improved here in Sri Lanka?
To be honest with you, I don't think that international trade has improved in Sri Lanka. Because if you really see the hierarchical structure for a multinational, now we don't have so many multinationals in Sri Lanka. I'm giving you one example from one dimension. We have only few multinationals like Dilma, Blesna, Damro to a certain extent, Maliban, Munchie, and so on. Because if you really analyze the hierarchical structure for a multinational, foundation is the cottage industry. We don't have that in Sri Lanka. The second layer is to have a sound SME sector. Even that is not there. Now, some time back, I can remember when I was schooling, Honorable Lalit Athulamudali formed NDB Bank and DFCC Bank to provide the required capital for entrepreneurs and the businessmen to take loans at a very low interest rate. But unfortunately, today, after about 20 years, 30 years, they are into commercial lending. So we don't have any proper organization, lending institute in Sri Lanka to provide loans at 3%, 4% to encourage this cottage industry and the SME sector. That's a huge setback for Sri Lanka. Then also, when you say international trade, for any government, the prime objective has to be to maximize the exports and to minimize imports. So we have to do a lot to increase our exports. We still depend on tea, rubber, coconut and garments, which is grossly inadequate for a country like Sri Lanka. So we have to look for non-traditional products and so many other products. And also we have to take our absolute advantages, comparative advantages, also acquired advantages to attract foreign direct investments. Because we have to have a solid foreign exchange reserve here in Sri Lanka. So through exports we can earn, but our imports are higher than the exports. So we have a negative aspects. So how do you bridge that? One aspect is to attract or allure little bit of foreign direct investments. For that we have to, as I told you, we have to analyze all these advantages and come up with a proper strategy to attract foreign direct investors to Sri Lanka, ignoring or say forgetting countries like India and so on, because India is also in the process of attracting so many foreign direct investors. Now Vietnam is attracting about $6 billion per year from foreign direct investors. So we have lots of other aspects, other advantages, but we are not using them properly. That's one aspect. Then also we can improve on tourism, where we can attract. Now so far, sorry to say, but I haven't seen a proper tourism strategy to attract tourists to Sri Lanka. Our ambassadors and high commissioners can play a crucial role to attract tourists to Sri Lanka from their countries, to encourage or to identify foreign direct investors who are willing to invest in Sri Lanka, and then to integrate or link them to the relevant authorities in Sri Lanka like BOI, and also to constantly look for opportunities, export opportunities for Sri Lanka, and then to link them or to advise our relevant authorities. So likewise, and also foreign remittances, Sri Lankans who have gone abroad can send so much of money. So likewise, we can look into so many other avenues and directions to improve our foreign reserves. So when this improves only, country can gain or enjoy that type of surpluses in that direction. Otherwise, eternally our imports are going up, exports are coming down, and foreign direct investments, we don't have so much. So all these negatives are creating a huge negative impact over our balance of payment and so on. That's why the dollar is appreciating and rupee is coming down and so on.
Through this conference, the AMDISA regional conference, what would you hope to bring out through your participation in the conference?
Yes, as a senior consultant of PIM, today evening and tomorrow full day, I'll be participating for all the technical sessions, and I intend to bring up certain suggestions as well as to listen to their suggestions as well. Then we can really evaluate the pros and cons, and also their views from, their views in a different way, and then to analyze and then to contribute and to add value during these 2 days.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much.